The Dinosaur TV show Iceberg has been in high demand ever since I did the 2 dinosaur movie Icebergs, and it's been a while since I've done one of these. I'm assuming you know how icebergs work at this point, so I'm not going to bore you with that. This specific one is made by me, and it's meant to be a combination of personal familiarity and general public familiarity. Meaning the placements of the entries are determined mainly by how well I know them or how interested I personally am of them, but for some entries I've determined their placements due to how well known or forgetful they are to the general public. If for whatever reason how well I know or don't know a show offends you, you have my full permission to take the iceberg chart yourself and rearrange the entries however you want. I also want to add, with maybe the exception of one show, this iceberg is tackling fictional shows and cartoons. Documentaries are not included, as they could easily be their own iceberg that I will probably make one day if there's enough of a demand for it. Anyways, with that said, let's get started with the Dinosaur TV show Iceberg. Dinosaurs. Around the late 80s, filmmaking puppeteer Jim Henson would team up with artist William Stout to create a dinosaur movie that was called the Natural History Project in its early stages, and the plan was to bring its dinosaurs to life with stop motion and puppetry. It seemed that Henson was really interested in making a dinosaur film, and things were going pretty well for it at first. That was until Warner Brothers, who teamed up with Henson to make this movie happen, became concerned with the talks of an upcoming movie that Universal was working on called The Land Before Time. So the project was temporarily delayed before being entirely cancelled. But Henson didn't want to give up on making a dinosaur-related project, so shortly after, in around 1988, he'd conceive a new idea, this time of a TV show that was formatted as a traditional family sitcom, with the gimmick being that it took place in prehistoric times and was centered around dinosaurs. Unfortunately for Henson, he didn't get to properly see this idea all the way through, as he would pass away in 1990 from a strep infection that damaged his lungs. Despite this tragedy, the dinosaur show would still be made with the efforts of Henson's kids and company, who came together to create his sitcom. What would result was 1991's Dinosaurs, which would follow the Sinclair family, cleverly named after the Sinclair oil company that has their own history with dinosaurs. This family includes Earl and Fran and their 3 kids, Robbie, Charlene, and Baby, along with Fran's mother, Ethel. In this world, they are advanced anthropomorphic dinosaurs that pretty much do all the normal human things. Go to work, go to school, raise a family, commit tax fraud, you know, the usual stuff. The dinosaurs were brought to life with tons of practical works, including animatronics, suits, and puppet effects. Fun fact, a couple of people who worked on the show as puppeteers included Pons Maar and Bruce Lanoil, who would go on to work on some of the creature effects on Theodore Rex sometime later. And another fun fact is that Baby was voiced by Kevin Clash, the same man who would puppeteer and voice Elmo on Sesame Street from 1985 to 2012. The show's meant to be a funny family sitcom that featured the everyday antics of our characters, but the show also tackled several heavier topics that included things like environmentalism, racism, misogyny, and drug abuse, just to name a few. But because of the show's nature, some of these issues were portrayed through dinosaur-centric metaphors. One popular example that's often referenced is the season 2 episode I Never Ate for My Father, where Robbie starts to question the traditional carnivorous diet that he's expected to have and explores a more herbivorous one, much to the dismay of his father. In case you couldn't pick up on it, the show was using vegetarianism as a metaphor for homosexuality. Then, of course, we have the show's infamous ending, which is what it may be most well known for, as it's often described as being one of the saddest show endings in television history. In the final episode of the show, which was called Changing Nature, the dinosaurs attempt to solve all their environmental problems in all the wrong ways, leading to all plant life being destroyed, the clouds blocking out the sun, and the start of a whole new ice age. The episode ends on an uncertain note, with the family huddled together in their home hopeful that everything will work out just fine, as it continues to blizzard outside, indicating that this may very well be the end of the dinosaurs. According to the show's creators, they got word that Dinosaurs was planned to be cancelled after the 4th season, so they accepted the fate of the project and decided to end it off with a strong metaphor about self-extinction, and how that mirrors our own reality. Primal. Primal has to be my favorite dinosaur show out there, at least season 1 Primal. The show was made by Genndy Tartakovsky, the same man who made Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory. The show is about a Neanderthal caveman named Spear and a Tyrannosaurus Rex named Fang, who bond over familiar tragedies after both their families are killed by a common enemy. Together, the two survive in a deadly prehistoric world containing all sorts of terrifying creatures, including mammoths, giant bugs, witches, infected sauropods, and so on. The way the show worked was that every episode had a new threat, and as we progressed through it, we see Spear and Fang's bond as friends grow stronger. At least, that's how it worked in Season 1. The final episode of Season 1 ended on a huge cliffhanger. After Spear and Fang meet a new and more advanced human named Mira, she learns to survive with them before she's recaptured by a Viking-like group called the Scorpions, who she initially escaped from shortly before she met Spear and Fang. In the second season, the show follows a more linear storyline, with each episode continuing said story from the last, as we follow Spear and Fang in their attempt to rescue Mira and escape the many new threats they face along the way. The season does take some interesting turns here and there, but overall, I'd say it's still inferior to the previous season, especially with that weird-ass ending. Primal wasn't always supposed to be a gritty, gory show meant for an older audience. Initially, Tartakovsky drew out ideas to make the show more kid-friendly in its early stages, as it featured a young boy surviving in a prehistoric world with his companion T-Rex friend. Based on these early concepts, the cartoon would have been very stylized to fit something more akin to his earlier works. But he didn't do much with the idea until he started working on the final season of Samurai Jack. This final season took a much more adult-oriented approach with the show don't tell story format, which audiences responded well to. This would inspire Tartakovsky to create an entire show based on that show don't tell idea. So he would bring back out his concept of a boy and his dinosaur and repurposed it, modifying it to eventually become Primal. As of right now, the show only has 2 seasons, but a third one has been announced, though we don't have much to go off of as to what it might entail. Primeval. After the success of Walking with Dinosaurs, Tim Haynes teamed up with Adrian Hodges to create its fictional counterpart in the form of Primeval, which at the time went under the working title of Cutter's Bestiary. Initially, the idea was taken to BBC in the early 2000s, and according to Haynes himself, I'd made a documentary-style series called Walking with Dinosaurs for the BBC back in 2000, and it stuck with me that all that technology could be used for a drama. Because the BBC wanted a recognizable piece of IP, we made Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World first. I then came up with the idea of Cutter's Bestiary and developed a script with another writer, which didn't go anywhere. It ended up being turned down due to the BBC finding the show to be too similar to the at the time new Doctor Who show made by Russell T Davies, and they were more committed to that project than Primeval. But Haynes' show would find a home with ITV. It would be produced by Impossible Pictures, the same company that produced Walking with Dinosaurs, and would debut in 2007, resulting in being a critical and financial hit with audiences in the UK, leading to the show being brought on to BBC America, where it would also garner critical success with US audiences. The show is revolved around Nick Cutter, a zoologist who investigates a series of unique animal attacks, which all seem to be connected to these seemingly random rips in time and space that they call anomalies. These anomalies are essentially doors that connect the present day to the prehistoric past, and in some cases, the future as well. Each episode follows our group of characters trying to contain the anomalies and whatever prehistoric animals come out of them to prevent death and chaos caused by this interference of time and space. Sounds like a very interesting and cool concept for a TV show, but unfortunately it had some troubles along the way. Initially, ITV had cancelled it in 2009, which seemed weird considering the show was on its 3rd season and was doing pretty well at this point. But the decision to axe it was due to ITV almost going bankrupt after an economic crisis in 2008. However, just 3 months later, the show would be recommissioned for 13 episodes, which were split up into 2 series that would air within the next couple of years before the show would get cancelled again in 2011 for even more financial reasons from ITV. There was a 2012 revival show that I'll get more into in a bit here, but aside from that, the future of Primeval seems rather bleak. Despite Haynes and Hodges expressing interest in reviving the show, that doesn't seem to be the same case for any networks. Regardless, the show that we did end up getting was very cool, and I can only hope that one day, even if it's a while from now, we can get some sort of Primeval continuation or revival. Primeval New World. In 2011, the Canadian TV network Space picked up a new show called Primeval New World, a spin-off to the original 2007 series, with this one set in Vancouver, British Columbia, and focuses on a new set of characters that pretty much do the same thing as the characters did in the original show. When anomalies start appearing around the area with prehistoric creatures coming out of them to wreak havoc across a Canadian province, a team of scientists band together to solve and contain the problem. Despite its development being associated with a different production company, that being Omnifilm Productions, Impossible Pictures would return to help produce it as well. According to the vice president of Omnifilm Productions, Gabriella Schoenbach, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, the show had been in development for about 2.5 years, meaning it was being made during the original series' final 2 seasons. And in 2012, the show would be released with 13 episodes. And that's it. It ended up being cancelled after 1 season, and a second season was not to be renewed due to the show's poor ratings. It seems that this would be the last we'd see from Primeval, as from what I can see, there hasn't been any sort of announcement or any kind of indication of a revival to the show despite the demand for it. Prehistoric Park. So this was the exception entry that I mentioned earlier because 2006's Prehistoric Park is actually a mix between a documentary and a fictional TV show. It revolves around British wildlife TV presenter Nigel Marven, who uses time travel to go back to the prehistoric past to visit and save the dinosaurs from extinction by bringing them back to the present and keeping them inside a nature preserve. Each episode features Marvin traveling to a different geological time period, encountering all sorts of different creatures including large bugs, Deinosuchus, mammoths, and of course, plenty of dinosaurs. But all of this is presented in an educational format, serving as a sort of fictional documentary, which was also produced by Impossible Pictures and was also featured on the ITV network. They only aired one 6-episode season of the show starting in July of 2006, and I'm seeing a couple of different places from around the internet, mainly through word of mouth, that apparently Prehistoric Park was cancelled in favor of Primeval, which would release the following year on the same network. But I didn't find a solid source for that, so take it with a grain of salt. Although, let's be honest, we all know the real reason why there wasn't a continuation to Prehistoric Park. Dino Riders. Dino Riders is a late 80s TV show about an alien race known as the Valorians who are forced to leave their home after they're attacked by an enemy alien race called the Rulons. As they're attempting to escape the Rulons, the Valorians initiate the Space-Time Energy Projection Crystal, or the STEP Crystal for short, which is interfered by the Rulons' force, causing the two groups to be launched through space and time, sending them to crash land on a prehistoric Earth. The Valorians use their telepathic powers to communicate and befriend the dinosaurs as allies to fight against the Rulons and help build a new civilization on their new home. Meanwhile, the Rulons wish to go back to their own time and place to keep ruling over galaxies, but can only do that with the power of the STEP Crystal. So the show is revolved around the Rulons constantly going after the Valorian camp and attacking with their own dinosaurs that they've brainwashed using brain boxes that forces the dinosaurs under their command. The dinosaurs from both groups are fitted with armor and laser guns to be able to shoot and damage their enemies. But because it's an animated kids show, there are no deaths featured, which, no surprise there. Speaking of kids shows, this show, like most shows from the 80s, was actually a result of a toy line that was in development since like 1985. That's when it was first conceptualized, and it went through a 3-year process before its eventual release in December of 1987, which would end up being an absolute hit, leading to 2 more toy series and a sub-series to be made, along with a comic series, and of course the TV show to promote the toy line to kids, which was a pretty common trend back in the 80s, and even to this day you see a lot of shows use that same method to promote their toy products. I actually have a longer video talking about the history of the Dino Riders franchise if you want to look more into it. It's actually a pretty interesting story. Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous is a tie-in show to the main Jurassic World movie franchise. Spanning between 5 seasons, it takes place during the events of the 2015 movie, and makes its way through the timeline of the rest of the films in this most recent trilogy. The show is about a group of kids who attend a dinosaur camp on Isla Nublar, the island where they genetically engineered dinosaurs and made a theme park out of it. This camp, known as Camp Cretaceous, unsurprisingly ends in disaster after the dinosaurs eventually escape from their enclosures, leaving the kids by themselves on the island island, forcing them to survive against the loose dinosaurs and learn the power of friendship or some shit like that, I don't know. I stopped watching after the first season because I thought the show sucked. But from what I've heard and seen, the show seems to have an overall decent reception amongst the fan base. As someone from the outside looking in, a part of me is still glad I avoided the rest of the show. Apparently, it features shit like the dinosaurs fighting robots, and I guess there's a Smilodon now, along with some weird dinosaur hybrids. Not that any of that is bad on its own, I just don't really care to learn how it fits in the Jurassic franchise. Some of the fan-favorite dinosaurs make a return in this show, like the Spinosaurus, the Ceratosaurus, and the Dilophosaurus. So I guess there's that, but it's nothing that would interest me enough to watch the rest of the show. The show was made by DreamWorks Animation and was released on Netflix in 2020. Despite having 5 seasons, the show had about a 2-year run before ending, lasting from September of 2020 to July of 2022. Or technically ending in November of 2022 if you count the special that came out shortly after the show ended, which was called Camp Cretaceous Hidden Adventure. It was a choose-your-own-adventure style episode where people got to make decisions for the characters, which would lead them through different scenarios and different endings. All I know about it is that it introduced a weird-looking Tarbosaurus, and that's about it. Jurassic World Chaos Theory. Jurassic World Chaos Theory is the sequel show to Camp Cretaceous, which follows the same group of kids dubbed the Nublar Six, this time as adults who are forced back into the fray after they become involved in a conspiracy centered around the dinosaurs that are now loose on the mainland. As a result, they are now being targeted by dangerous people with dangerous dinosaurs, some of which show up in the movies. How it ties into the movies, I have no idea, because I have even less of an interest in watching this show. Initially, the show's executive producer, Scott Kramer, didn't want to make a sequel show, as he felt they had told and concluded their story about the Nublar Six. But after chatting with another executive producer, Aaron Hammersley, the first 2 seasons came out in 2024, and the 3rd season was released in April of this year. And as far as I know, I believe the show is still ongoing. Dinosaur King. Dinosaur King is one of the most requested topics on my channel, and I'm just gonna put this out there right now that I personally have no intentions of ever making this a full-on video, because I just have no interest in anime in general. Nothing against the format, it's just not my cup of tea. Therefore, I'm not going to waste my time forcing myself to make a whole video on something I don't even have an interest in. That being said, given the context of this video, I'm willing to talk about it a little bit. Dinosaur King is a 2007 anime show that initially started out as an arcade game by Sega, before being adapted into a 2-season show that would be produced by Sunrise Incorporated and aired on Nagoya TV. After a strange object lands in a nearby forest, a trio of kids set off to see what it could be. The object turns out to be a stone with symbols on them representing lightning, wind, and grass. Along with the stones are dinosaur cards, which when contacted with its respective stone, can bring one of 2 versions of the dinosaurs to life. A very cutesy 2D animated version, and a larger, more realistic 3D animated version of it. The cards and stones initially belonged to the show's main antagonist group, the Alpha Team, who lost them after their time machine exploded and sent the stones and cards to present day. The show would last for a total of 79 episodes spanning between 2 seasons, and would also have other forms of media released of it, including a trading card game and a manga. Super Sentai and Power Rangers. Super Sentai is a long-running superhero show originally created by Toei, which started all the way back in 1975. The show itself isn't exactly about dinosaurs, but they are a prominent motif in some of the installments of the series. Like, for example, the show's 16th installment titled Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, or Dinosaur Squadron Zyuranger. In this installment, 5 warriors, each from a different ancient tribe that once coexisted with dinosaurs, are brought out of stasis during modern times and band together to fight against the evil forces that wiped out their tribes and the dinosaurs 170 million years ago. This specific season aired in 1992, and would actually serve as the basis for what would eventually become its American adaptation, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which aired in 1993. In this show, 5 teenagers are chosen as Earth's defenders and are given superhuman abilities to fight evil extraterrestrial threats. Part of their abilities are being able to summon giant fighting robots that are based on prehistoric animals called Dinosaurs. These include a Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Pterodactyl, a Sabertooth, and a Mastodon. Both Super Sentai and Power Rangers would continue to use dinosaurs as their motifs for future installments of their series. For Super Sentai, this includes 2003's Burstasaur Squadron Abaranger, 2014's Electroblast Squadron Kyoryuger, and 2019's Nidosaurus Squadron Ryusolger. Sorry if I mispronounce any of these. For Power Rangers, this includes 2004's Power Rangers Dino Thunder, 2015's Power Rangers Dino Charge, and 2021's Power Rangers Dino Fury. I would go through all of their specific story summaries, but I'm sure that'll make this video a lot longer than it needs to be, so I'm just gonna leave it here. Maybe one day I'll dedicate an entire video to it. Doctor Who. In case you haven't picked up on it yet, I'm going to be adding some non-dinosaur shows in this iceberg, but they're included because they do use dinosaurs to some extent or another. Listen, I'm loose with my own rules, alright? I wanted to include Doctor Who because even though the show itself isn't primarily centered around dinosaurs, it does introduce dinosaur-centered episodes that I thought were really cool. Some of the most well-known examples include Doctor Who and the Silurians, Invasion of the Dinosaurs, and Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. I'm sure there's more examples, but for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to explain these ones. Doctor Who and the Silurians was the second serial in the 7th season of the show's classic era, which lasted for 7 total episodes. When a series of power failures causes concern at an underground nuclear power facility located within a cave system, the Doctor and his assistant are called upon to solve the problem. When they investigate the caves, they learn that the power is being siphoned by a colony of reptilian humanoid beings called the Silurians. They're a very advanced species that used to populate Earth, only receding to the caves when they thought an extinction event was on the horizon. This was millions of years ago, and they had the technology to put themselves in stasis up until present day, where they are determined to awaken their whole colony using power from the nuclear facility, wipe out the humans, and retake Earth as their home again. At one point, we see that the Silurians even use dinosaurs as pets, or in this case guard dogs, to attack anyone that comes close enough to their base. Invasion of the Dinosaurs was the second serial in the 11th season of the classic Doctor Who series that lasted for 6 episodes. A series of temporal occurrences causes living dinosaurs to appear and disappear across the London area, forcing the military to evacuate the city to solve the problem. When the Doctor gets involved, he suspects that these occurrences are the side effects of someone messing with time. It's later revealed that this is all part of a huge plan that involves taking an elite group of people off planet while time on Earth reverts to a more primitive era so that they can come back and start the human race off anew. The dinosaurs were brought to life using prop models, and if I'm gonna be honest, they aren't the best, especially that T-Rex. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is a single episode that appeared in the 7th season of the show's revived era. The Doctor in this series is tasked to investigate an unresponsive spaceship that's flying towards Earth. He takes a group of friends and acquaintances and travels to the ship where they discover a bunch of dinosaurs roaming free on it. It's revealed the ship belonged to the Silurians that designed it to travel off-planet when they noticed a celestial body, which ended up being the moon, was coming close to Earth. Planning for a catastrophe, the reptilian race gathered some of the wildlife of their time and escaped Earth to find a new home. However, the ship was raided by a black market trader who wanted to steal the dinosaurs. Again, I'm sure there's more episodes that I could talk about, but these are the ones I was interested in the most. Plus, we have a lot of other dinosaur shows to talk about. Dinotopia. The history of Dinotopia as an on-screen adaptation is weird. It first started out as a miniseries that was aired in May of 2002. That miniseries was later combined together as a film that was released on DVD, which is what many people seem to be the most familiar with because it's one I see referenced often. However, later that year, in November of 2002, a spin-off show was created as a sequel to that miniseries that lasted for one 13-episode season. Despite being based on the book series by the same name, the show creates and follows its own story. While the book follows Arthur Dennison and his son Will as they are marooned on a seemingly uncharted island, but soon find out that it not only contains dinosaurs, but very intelligent dinosaurs that work alongside humans that also inhabit the island to create entire cities and civilizations, the TV series is focused on the Scott family, which includes pilot Frank Scott and his 2 boys Carl and David, who are marooned on the island after their plane crashes into the ocean during a storm. Luckily, they washed up on the beaches of Dinotopia, where they're rescued and helped by the inhabitants, which includes a friendly Troodon dinosaur named Zippo. These characters and the rest of the inhabitants on the island have to fight against a new threat in the form of a group of outlaws called the Outsiders. Unfortunately for the show, it didn't get the numbers and ratings the creators were hoping for, so after it didn't improve by the 6th episode, ABC, the network that aired it, would axe the show and the rest of the series would be released via home media. The Lost World. The Lost World is a 66-episode, 3-season show adaptation of the original book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that goes by the same name. The show is revolved around a group of characters that are led by a Professor George Challenger to a plateau within the Amazon rainforest via hot air balloon, where they end up crashing into a lost world inhabited by dinosaurs, giant bugs, a tribe of Neanderthals, and even lizard people. The series ran from 1999 to 2002 before being cancelled, and unfortunately for fans of the series, it was cancelled after the show left off on a cliffhanger, which is always just the worst. You get yourself invested into a show, and it's getting good, and it ends a season on something that's so crucial and could potentially change everything about the show. But then it gets cancelled, and you never get that closure of how the show could have ended or continued. The show was going through a lot of financial struggles, as its production cost, especially in the beginning, was pretty high, with the extended pilot episode apparently costing around $4 million to make. By the 3rd season, they had to cut down on costs, so it appeared cheaper than the previous 2 seasons because of it. And even though the show creators were told that a 4th season would be financed, this would end up falling through, but not before they completed the 3rd season with a cliffhanger that would never be resolved. Terra Nova. Terra Nova is another show that people have asked me to cover for a while, which, don't worry, I definitely plan to cover it one day, but for now, here's a little summary. Terra Nova is a show that initially takes place in the future in the year of 2149, where Earth is polluted and damaged beyond repair, so in order to preserve the human race, time travel is created for humans to go back in time to the Cretaceous era so that humanity can do better the second time around. We follow the Shannon family through their venture in this new primordial world, where they're able to have a better life than they had in the future, but of course, there are still a lot of problems to deal with. Namely the fact that there are a lot of prehistoric threats like Carnotaurus and even some fictional dinosaurs, like the Axoraptor, Ovisaurus, and Nycoraptors. With a concept this grand, it's no surprise that Terra Nova would go on to becoming a very expensive show to make, costing around $4 million for each episode. In total, 13 episodes were made for the first and only season. And to give it even more potential, the show also had Steven Spielberg on board as an executive producer. Eventually, it would finally debut on July 23rd of 2011 at the San Diego Comic-Con, and would air on Fox later that year in September. Despite holding decent ratings, the show would bring in 7.5 million viewers in the US, which may sound like a big number, but was unfortunately not as good as Fox was hoping. Fox would try to sell the show to another network to continue it for another season, and this would attract the attention of Netflix, who seemed interested at first in picking up the show. However, this interest would eventually die off, as it was speculated Netflix was turned off by the show's high production budget, which could provide too much of a risk for the streaming service. With this, the show would ultimately be cancelled, and we wouldn't see much of anything from it for the years that would follow. Except, about a year later, in 2012, Fox released a bunch of different assets including pictures and audio files of sound effects and music on a website called TerraNovaStory.com, all exclusively offered to those that bought the DVD release of the show. The idea was to give the audience everything they needed to create their own motion comic ending using the assets that Fox provided, then encourage the fans to upload their comic to their YouTube channels, send the link to their videos to Fox so that they can review it, and post it on their official gallery on their website. That's the coolest shit ever. Because nowadays, fan projects for things like Jurassic World can get axed completely due to Universal being overly paranoid about their copyrighted content being used for something they're not making money off of. If only more companies were encouraging of their fan bases to making something cool and uploading them wherever without bullshit copyright issues. Dino Sapien. One of the weirder shows on this list, but still one that was recommended to me a lot, Dino Sapien is a 15-episode miniseries produced in partnership by the BBC and Cambrium Catalyst. The show is about our main character Lauren, whose scientist mother runs a dinosaur-themed summer camp called the Dinosaur Explorers Camp, but things start to get weird in the camp when Lauren encounters a few strange animals that end up being evolved and advanced dinosaurs. One of them being Dino, an intelligent theropod-like dinosaur who's chased by a couple of what look to be a cross between an ankylosaur and a pachycephalosaurus-like dinosaurs, that are a lot more brutish but still intelligent. They're seen using tools and gesturing at each other, and at some points, Dino even talks. The dinosaurs initially lived within the Earth, which is how they were able to escape extinction, and why they haven't been seen by humans after all these years. It wasn't until an earthquake created an opening where Dino and the Diggers, as they're called in the show, emerge from. For whatever reason, the Diggers chase Dino around and wreak havoc around the woods throughout the season. But they aren't the only villains, as Lauren's mother also befriends another scientist named Clive Akins, who becomes interested in Dino and wants to capture him. Out of all the shows in this iceberg, this is definitely one of the ones I'm most interested in, because I love the concept of speculative and intelligently advanced dinosaurs, so this would be one I'd consider covering more in depth in the future. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs takes place in a post-apocalyptic world in the far future where humans and dinosaurs live together, some living in harmony with them and others battling against them. The show is centered around Jack Turnick, a member of the Old Blood Mechanics, a group of people that use the knowledge and tech of the old world. Turnick himself often drives in his Cadillac, and he's partnered with Hannah Dundee, a scientist who's from a less advanced civilization traveling to visit a dystopian New York City, now called the City in the Sea. Together, they have to fight against poachers, a corrupted government, and plenty of attacks from the dinosaurs. The show is actually based on a comic series that was initially called the Xenozoic Tales by a comic book publishing company called Kitchen Sink Press, and it was created by illustrator Mark Schultz. This was around the mid to late 80s, but around the early 90s, Marvel Comics would get their hands on the series, retitle it to Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and publish a few issues when Topps, in 1994, would also release their own version of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, with the permission of Schultz, that was meant to be a continuation to the original series, but only 9 issues of it were released. However, it seemed to be received well enough to get an arcade game and animated TV show adaptation. Unsurprisingly, this is another entry that people want me to cover more in depth one day, which I do plan to do at some point. Kong, the animated series. Meant to compete with the animated Godzilla series that aired between 1998 and 2000, Kong the Animated Series was a sequel to the original 1933 film. After Kong gets shot down from the Empire State Building in New York, some of his DNA is taken by scientist Dr. Lorna Jenkins and is mixed with the human DNA of her grandson Jason. This creates a new and powerful Kong that she's kept with her on the mainland when he was young. But when this has shown to be too dangerous for the large ape, she takes him back home to Kong Island, where many years later she invites her now teenage grandson Jason, along with his friend Tan and his professor Ramon de la Porta, who is revealed to be a villain who's after the power to take over the world using the Primal Stones, ancient relics that originated on the island. So Jason, Tan, and one of the island's inhabitants, Lua, have to work together with Kong to fight off the dangers on the island, including dinosaurs and other prehistoric threats, in order to stop Ramon's plans. The show would air from September of 2000 to March of 2001 and last for about 40 episodes that were divided into 2 seasons. The show incorporates a lot more supernatural and technological elements. For example, one of the main enemies is a lava deity called Kairos, and the show has technology that allows the characters to merge their minds and bodies with animals. Very weird for a concept like King Kong, but pretty normal in the context of a crazy kids show. The series would spawn 2 tie-in direct-to-video movies called Kong, King of Atlantis in 2005 and Kong, King of the Jungle in 2006, featuring the same characters, although I don't know for sure if they continue or reference any of the events of the TV show, or if they're supposed to have their own contained adventures. But if I were to guess, it's probably the latter. The Land Before Time. Shortly after the release of the 12th movie of the Land Before Time franchise, a show was created and eventually released in March of 2007 that would follow our main characters Littlefoot, Sarah, Petrie, Ducky, and Spike on new adventures, this time in an episodic format. These adventures included meeting new friends, meeting new enemies, exploring new places, and so on and so forth. Really, from all that I can see of it, it seems like a pretty standard show, nothing too crazy. It had a 26-episode run spanning between 2007 and 2008 and lasted for 2 seasons, which initially aired on Cartoon Network but would eventually move to other networks like YTV, Kids Station, and ABC. The Flintstones. The Flintstones is an animated comedy show that's set during the Stone Age where we follow the zany and fun lives of 2 cave people families, Fred Flintstone, his wife Wilma, their daughter Pebbles, and their pets Dino the Dinosaur and Baby Puss the saber-toothed cat. Along with them, we also follow their neighbors Barney Rubble, his wife Betty, and their son Bam Bam. Of course, with the whole caveman theme going on in the show, there's definitely a lot of antics that include dinosaurs, so it only made sense to add it to the list. Some are wild, some are domesticated, and some even serve as tools for the cave people, like the brontosaurs being used for construction. The show was produced by Hanna-Barbera Productions, and the original show aired in 1960 and ran for 6 years, as it would end up becoming very popular, especially among adult audiences. It would be such a hit that it would be considered the most financially successful animated series, a title that it would hold until it was eventually beat out by The Simpsons decades later. Even after its initial run, the franchise would continue with spin-off and sequel shows like 1971's The Pebbles and Bam Bam Show, 1972's The Flintstones Comedy Hour, 1979's The New Fred and Barney Show, 1986's The Flintstone Kids, even to now with the more recent 2021's Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. And those are just to name a few. There's more spin-off shows along with several TV specials and many other formats made for the IP, including both animated and live-action films. The Ray Bradbury Theater. Ray Bradbury is one of the most well-known science fiction authors, having written hundreds of influential stories that hold political and social themes and messages that are still relevant to this day. In the 80s, Bradbury created a science fiction anthology show called The Ray Bradbury Theater that would feature on-screen adaptations of many of his short stories. In total, the show ran for about 65 episodes between 6 seasons. One thing you gotta know about Bradbury is that he loved dinosaurs, being first mesmerized by them through the most influential dinosaur movie in the world, 1925's The Lost World. So it made sense that he would eventually write short stories about dinosaurs. This includes The Foghorn, Besides a Dinosaur, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up?, A Sound of Thunder, Tyrannosaurus Rex, and so on. Well, 2 of his dinosaur short stories, more specifically A Sound of Thunder and Tyrannosaurus Rex, would be given on-screen adaptations through his Ray Bradbury Theater show, both of which were unsurprisingly faithful to their source materials. For those of you that may not have heard of these 2 short stories, A Sound of Thunder is set in the future where time travel has been accomplished and is now exploited by a company called Time Safari, who offer rich game hunters an excursion to the past to hunt down animals that no longer exist. One day, a man named Mr. Eccles pays for one of these excursions to go back in time to hunt the king of the dinosaur itself, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and is given a rundown on all the strict rules that he must adhere to in order to go on the safari, one of which is to never step off the hovering path that Time Safari laid out for them to avoid touching anything in the past, as even touching something so small and minor could alter the future. Well, when the group approaches the T-Rex later on in the story, Mr. Eccles panics and runs off the path. Once the T-Rex is slain and the group go back to the present, they are terrified to see that things have changed, indicating that they did something to alter the future. That's soon revealed when Mr. Eccles lifts his boot and sees that he stepped on a small butterfly. Tyrannosaurus Rex is a more meta story about a special effects artist who's working on a stop-motion dinosaur film for a famous yet unpleasant movie producer, who hires him to make his dinosaur models on a minuscule budget, gives him cheap equipment that barely works, and forces him to make constant changes to said dinosaurs within short deadlines, much to the dismay of the artist. The producer wants a more monstrous look to the dinosaur, and every time the artist makes changes to it, it ends up looking more and more like the producer himself. Bradbury has gone on record to say that this story came about from a real-life incident where he, and at one point, his friend, famous special effects artist Ray Harryhausen, attended a meeting with an unnamed movie producer who was asking them to work at an unreasonably low pay on a dinosaur film they wanted to make. Bradbury walked out of the meeting and wrote a short story inspired by the events. The best part is that this producer would go on to make this dinosaur movie without the help of Bradbury and or Harryhausen, and it would end up being really awful, as the producer would use lizards with props glued onto them instead of using any actual good special effects. In the end, it was Bradbury that got the last laugh. Land of the Lost. The original Land of the Lost was a 3-season show that initially aired on NBC on September 7th, 1974, and it featured a family of 3, the Marshalls, who consist of a father and his 2 kids, going through a portal during a rafting excursion that transports them to a parallel dimension where the world is much more primitive, and is inhabited by dinosaurs, a group of ape-like creatures called the Pakuni, and a humanoid reptilian group called the Sleestock, all of which the family have to deal with in one way or another in order to survive in this new world until they could find a way to get back to their own. The show used a mix of practical effects, including some costume designs and stop motion to portray some of their creatures, and it was aimed to a younger audience, but was still commended for its ability to create a lively fantasy world for the budget they were working with, and would go on to spawn a remake in the 90s and a movie parody in 2009 that would star Will Ferrell, which was apparently received so horribly by the fans of the original show that the show's original creators, who also sporadically worked on the movie, Sid and Marty Krofft, apologized to fans for letting said movie be created. In truth, they didn't really play a huge role in the movie's overall creation and were just disappointed with how it turned out. Land of the Lost. 1991's Land of the Lost is the short-lived remake of the original series that only ran for 2 seasons. It also featured a family of 3, a father and his 2 kids, as they accidentally get thrown into a portal during a road trip. In this remake, however, the family are not supposed to be the same ones from the original, as in they're completely different characters. While in the previous show, we were following the Marshalls, in this one, we follow the Porters. And they also meet another survivor, a girl named Krista who was initially from 1960s San Francisco, before accidentally being stuck in the Land of the Lost from a very young age. But the show does feature similar threats in the form of dinosaurs and the reptilian Sleestock, who look slightly less creepy than their original counterparts. And there's still the inclusion of the ape-like Pakuni. Sid and Marty Krofft would return to help create this series, which also used various forms of practical effects like stop motion and some cool animatronic and/or puppet work in other parts. A total of 26 episodes were made, and from what I'm seeing here and there around the internet, the show was cancelled and didn't have a proper ending featuring the Porter family returning to their own world. Why it was cancelled, I'm not entirely sure. But these shows definitely seem like something I'd love to go more in depth with one day. I mean, to be honest, most of the shows on here are ones I don't mind making full retrospectives on. Tsuburaya's Dinosaur Show Trilogy. During the 70s, Japanese special effects studio Tsuburaya Productions would create a trilogy of dinosaur shows that included Dinosaur Expedition Born Free, Dinosaur Great War Iceberg, and Dinosaur Core Poseidon. In Dinosaur Expedition Born Free, the show is set 20 years in the future, where a passing comet causes Earth to open up and release dinosaurs that have been hidden away for millions of years. Their sudden coexistence with dinosaurs results in the formation of an organization that seeks to protect the dinosaurs with their advanced technology from a myriad of adversaries and other complications. The show uses a combination of effects, sticking to drawn animation for the human characters and using models and stop motion for the dinosaurs. Dinosaur Great War Iceberg is set in the near future, where modern dinosaurs wish to take back their world and declare war with humans in the form of sending kaiju-sized dinosaurs to terrorize various cities around the world, forcing humanity to fight back. This time, instead of stop motion, the studio decided to stick to a more traditional special effects method by using suitmation. Lastly, there's Dinosaur Core Poseidon, that's also set in the future where humans have discovered time travel and are now facilitating it. The story follows a superhero officer that helps manage time traveling who goes off on an adventure to the Cretaceous period, where he has to fight off extraterrestrial enemies that use the dinosaurs against them via telepathically controlling them. Sounds like a very familiar concept. In any case, this would be the last of Tsuburaya's Dinosaur Show trilogy. Godzilla. Over the years, Godzilla has featured in a handful of TV shows and series. This iteration of Godzilla didn't really look like its predecessors, as it was more of a stylized cartoon dinosaur. Very green, inconsistently sized, and had some stupid-sounding roars. And of course, he served as the good guy of the series, helping out the crew of a scientific research ship called the Calico, who are also friends with a much goofier and smaller Godzilla-like creature called Godzuki, who also has the ability to fly. The crew are able to summon Godzilla with a device that calls out to him whenever they seem to run into a new threat, which from what I can see were none of the original monsters that Godzilla would fight in the movies. As far as his fighting styles go, instead of an atomic breath, Godzilla spits out fire, and on top of that, he's also able to shoot out laser beams from his eyes. Originally, Joseph Barbera wanted to create the animated series as a sort of cartoon adaptation of the original movies, but unfortunately, network interference prevented him from doing that, and instead, they wanted him to tone the show down. According to Barbera himself in the book Japan's Favorite Monstar, the problem with the show was simply this. When they start telling you in standards and practices, don't shoot any flames at anybody, don't step on any buildings or cars, then pretty soon you've taken away all the stuff that he represents. That became the problem, to maintain a feeling of Godzilla and at the same time cut down everything that he did. We managed to get a fair show out of it. It was okay. Godzuki kind of got the kids going. Denver the Last Dinosaur. Denver the Last Dinosaur is a very cheesy animated cartoon from the 80s about a group of kids that stumble upon a giant egg, to which Denver, our main character, hatches out from. The egg that he hatched out from is what the characters refer to as a tar egg, which kept Denver sealed and safe from the extinction event and kept him alive all these years later. The kids quickly befriend the dinosaur and teach him the ways of the modern world while also keeping him safe from the public and the greedy hands of the show's main villain, Morton Fizback, a showrunner who wants to use Denver for his new band called the Rockin' Dinos. Shows like Denver the Last Dinosaur and Dink the Little Dinosaur were likely the result of the little dinosaur craze that was going around at the time, thanks to other popular IPs like The Land Before Time and Dino Riders. And the show itself went on for 2 seasons with 50 total episodes, but eventually the show would stop. Despite this, Denver was actually quite popular back in the day, apparently beating out other very popular shows like The Smurfs and Transformers in terms of ratings. That being said, not much would come from Denver until 2018, when the show would get a reboot with a completely different and CG-made design. The show was produced by Zagtoon and went by a new name called Denver and Cliff, focused on a different set of characters, gave Denver a greener coat, and shrunk him down in size. And it seems as early as April of this year, the company that produced the original show, World Events Productions, are planning to bring Denver back in a feature film. Extreme Dinosaurs. After an alien criminal uses interdimensional technology to transport himself to a prehistoric Earth, kidnap a band of dinosaurs, and transform them into strong anthropomorphic versions of themselves in an attempt to create an army to overthrow the world in his own dimension, the Extreme Dinosaurs, as they call themselves, escape and are saved from extinction by an alien law officer who puts them in sleeping pods that keep them safe for the next 65 million years. Now in the modern world, the Extreme Dinosaurs have to fight off evil anthropomorphic raptors that were also made by the same alien criminal and also escaped extinction. The Extreme Dinosaurs include the T-Rex leader, T-Bone, who's able to stomp the ground to cause the show's signature saurian stomp. There's also the Stegosaurus named Stegs, who's, funnily enough, the brains of the group that's able to use his body to saw blade through enemies. There's Spike the Triceratops, who's known for his martial arts fighting style, and then there's Bullseye the Pteranodon, whose main features are his ability to screech loudly and, of course, fly around. The show was actually originally called Dangerous Dinosaurs before it was eventually changed to Extreme Dinosaurs, and it ran for a total of 52 episodes before eventually stopping. Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs is a show about a battle between 2 groups of anthropomorphic alien dinosaurs, one of them being the dinosaurs themselves that originated from a planet called Reptilon and are led by Allo, and the other group are the bad guys of the show called the Tyrannos, led by their evil leader Genghis Rex. Once the 2 groups take their fight to Earth, the dinosaurs befriend a group of kids that dub themselves as the Secret Scouts, who help out their talking dinosaur friends in their many adventures and conflicts against the Tyrannos. The show originally aired in September of 1987 with 65 total episodes through a single season, which ended in December of the same year. It was produced by Deke Animation and distributed by Coca-Cola Telecommunications of all things. But the overall show was conceived by Michael E. Uslan. Uslan actually got the idea from his son, who at the time was very young and going through his phase of being obsessed with dinosaurs. But he was also obsessed with space. Uslan, being a film producer and comic writer, was wanting to create something that shared those 2 aspects, before one morning the idea hit him. Dinosaurs. Uslan would also study law and broke into the Hollywood scene, being hired as a production attorney for popular films like Apocalypse Now and Raging Bull. And through this, he would gain some connections that would later help him bring his Dinosaur show to fruition. It eventually did, and while it wasn't the biggest smash hit TV show, it's definitely well remembered, partly evident from the fact that I have received so many comments in my previous videos suggesting it as a possible topic for me to cover on my channel. And honestly, I can see why. The show is not only just very weird, but also has a bit of an interesting history to it that's just too much to get into now. The show would even kind of sort of result in a toy line by Galoob that was never properly released due to the show not performing as well as they were hoping for. Several action figures, spaceships, and a playset were made, but only a few of the larger action figures were actually released through a Brazilian toy company called Glasslight, that purchased the license from Galoob, and that's all that was ever released from the toys. Aside from that, there was also a comic book released in 2017 written by Uslan himself, but from my understanding, it wasn't given too much attention. Ark, the Animated Series. Ark, the Animated Series is about a paleontologist named Helena Walker who mysteriously wakes up on a seemingly deserted island before learning that she's on what's called the Ark, which is teeming with prehistoric life, hostile tribes, and secrets that may hold the answer on how to escape. The show is based on the video game titled Ark Survival Evolved that has pretty much the same concept. The player awakens on a strange island inhabited by dinosaurs and has to survive by living off the land, collecting resources, taming the dinosaurs, and exploring the island. In the process, you may even find materials that reveal some of the game's story, which I'm assuming has some parallels to the animated show. I don't actually know, because whenever I played Ark, I mainly played for the open world part of it, so I never really cared to actively look for anything regarding its story. That, and I just sucked at the game anyway. The show was released in 2024 and currently has a single season with 6 episodes, but it looks like a second season is being worked on. Dino Dan. Dino Dan is a 2009 Canadian children's show that follows Dan Henderson, a young dinosaur enthusiast who seeks to learn more about them with his friends. Together, they go on countless adventures discovering all kinds of dinosaurs and learning new things about them in a semi-story-based, semi-educational format. The show is meant for a younger demographic, I believe being rated Y7, so it's not exactly my cup of tea, though it's always nice to see an outlet for younger kids to be able to experience dinosaurs in an educational way. I only say this because this is one of those shows that people have suggested for me to cover on the channel in the past a few times, but if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have any desire to actually watch it, and even if I did, I really don't know what else I can really say about it. Sorry to disappoint you guys, but as far as Dino Dan goes, this is the most you're getting from me. La Brea. I'm suddenly realizing this list is full of exceptions because this is, yet again, not exactly a dinosaur show, but it does have a fun concept that does include them later on in the show's run. When a giant sinkhole opens up in the center of Los Angeles, hundreds of people fall in and find themselves in a world dominated by prehistoric wildlife that roamed the Earth around 10,000 BC. The show later reveals that the sinkholes are actually man-made portals that introduce a lot of time-traveling elements into the story, of which dinosaurs are eventually included in. This includes Spinosaurs, Raptors, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Pterosaurs, and so on. The show would air on NBC and ran for 3 seasons. Dino Squad. Dino Squad revolves around 5 teens who have the ability to transform into dinosaurs. A Tyrannosaurus Rex, a Pteranodon, a Styracosaurus, a Spinosaurus, and a Stegosaurus. Together, led by their teacher, Miss Moynihan, who is actually a green velociraptor who can transform into a human as a disguise, the team have to stop the evil Victor Velocci, a red velociraptor who can also transform into a person, but hates the human race and wants to destroy it so that he can bring back the dinosaurs and make things the way they were 65 million years ago, to which our heroes have to prevent. The show only lasted for 2 seasons, both of which had 13 30-minute long episodes. It aired on CBS from between 2007 and 2008, and the show initially went by the title I Was a High School Dinosaur before being changed to the condensed Dino Squad title it's known for today. Godzilla Island. So I can imagine that maybe within the context of the Godzilla fandom, this is a pretty well-known show, but I personally didn't actually know this was a thing until doing this video, which is why it's this far down. But Godzilla Island takes place in the future in the year of 2097, where all of the world's monsters have been collected and taken to an island in the South Pacific that's now known as Godzilla Island. The monsters seem to be fine here, until alien forces with their own set of monsters threaten their way of life. So the monsters, including the human characters that consists of a commander, his daughter, an alien ally, and their spherical robotic assistant, all have to work together to prevent these evil alien forces from overtaking Godzilla Island. The show ran for 2 seasons, and the episodes were very short, only having a 3-minute runtime, resulting in a total of 256 episodes total. Despite being funded by Toho, the show used miniatures and exclusive figures for their kaijus rather than the traditional men-in-suit method, likely because of budgetary reasons, which is understandable. Dink the Little Dinosaur. Having a 2-season run with a total of 21 episodes, Dink the Little Dinosaur follows a group of young dinosaur friends including Flapper the Pteranodon, Amber the Hadrosaur, Shyler the Dimetrodon, and Scat the Alligator thing, all led by Dink the Brontosaurus. The show follows their many misadventures around the land known as Green Meadow, including run-ins with carnivorous dinosaurs like Tyrannor, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the main villain of the show that chases our characters around to try and eat them. Sometimes when the dinosaur kids need advice or seek answers for their different problems, they seek it from their old but wise turtle friend Krusty. The 21 total episodes were divided between 2 seasons, and Season 2 introduced a new segment to the show called Factosaurus, which would feature a short focus on educating children about real-life dinosaurs. The art done in these segments was actually done by dinosaur and fantasy artist William Stout, who at this point I feel like I've mentioned so many times that I'm convinced this dude has just worked on every single dinosaur project ever created. Dino Me Card. Me Card, or Turning Me Card, is a toy and media franchise that seems to originally be about extraterrestrial vehicles or some shit like that the characters have to tame, I guess. But the show had a spin-off series called Dino Me Card, which is about a boy and his group of friends who find miniature dinosaurs called Tinosaurs that they have to find, capture, and tame so that they can use them to battle other Tinosaurs. Apparently, in this world, the dinosaurs never went extinct, but instead they turned into this thing called Mechanimals, and I guess they're just chilling in the modern world now. Despite being a spin-off, the show's characters don't seem to have any relation to the other characters in the original Me Card shows. The show was released in 2017 and had 1 season that lasted 52 episodes. Dino Adventure Jurassic Tripper. Dino Adventure Jurassic Tripper, or just Jura Tripper, is a 90s anime that features a group of 15 boys and girls going on a yacht training trip, but after coming across a storm at sea, they get launched into a different time, millions of years in the past, and get stranded on a prehistoric piece of land containing dinosaurs. But they soon learn that they're not alone in this new world, as on this land are other humans, ones with lesser advanced weapons and lifestyle, but greater in numbers and strength than the newcomers, which in turn leads to all kinds of conflicts within the show's 39-episode run. There's actually not a whole lot of information I could find about the show, but one thing that kept popping up about it during my research is that it was apparently a very loose adaptation of Jules Verne's novel 2 Years Vacation, which is a story about 14 schoolboys boarding a schooner to set off on a vacation before the boat accidentally drifts off to sea without the crew on board, leaving the boys alone. They also get hit by a storm and are eventually stranded on the island, where they have to work together to survive the elements that appear both on and off the island. LEGO Jurassic World: Legend of Isla Nublar. Despite being part of the Jurassic World property, this forgetful 13-episode series is actually a sequel to another LEGO Jurassic World TV program, LEGO Jurassic World: The Secret Exhibit, which is just a 2-part special that aired on NBC in 2018, which itself served as a prequel to the 2015 Jurassic World movie. Set 3 years before the 2015 film, Legend of Isla Nublar follows Claire and Owen preparing the theme park to be open to the public. But of course, things go wrong when the show's new villain gets involved, which is revealed to be Dennis Nedry's nephew, Danny Niedermeyer. Because this is a LEGO property as much as it is a Universal one, this show is very much a more goofy iteration of the Jurassic franchise. Dice. DICE, which stands for DNA Integrated Cybernetic Enterprises, is an anime that's focused on a group of kids a part of a special forces unit that possess vehicles that can transform into dinosaur robots. These vehicles are called Dino Breakers, of which there are many. The show was made by Japanese production studio Bandai Entertainment, animation studio Zebek, I think is how you pronounce it, and CGI studio Studio Galapagos. Together, the studios would create a total of 40 episodes that would be released from December 5th, 2005 to September 19th, 2006. As far as I know, the show went on for just one season, and that's pretty much it. There was a PS2 game that was made for it that was released on September 20th of 2005. But aside from that, there's not much to this show's legacy. Armored Saurus. Armored Saurus is a Korean-based TV series where dinosaurs had been captured and taken off-planet by aliens that aimed to use them as mechanized weapons. As the years went by, their empire would expand and the dinosaurs would become more and more powerful, using their abilities to wipe out entire planets. It wouldn't be long until they decide to return to Earth to wipe out its current inhabitants, the humans. However, mankind would create their own mechanical dinosaur defense force, the Armored Saurus, using dinosaurs they managed to genetically engineer to prepare for this alien invasion. The majority of the show's sets and dinosaurs were brought together using CGI. Apparently, the show's production studio, Studio Eon, used Unreal Engine to combine its CG effects with the live-action sequences, which for a TV show doesn't look that bad at all, though the show clearly copied some of their dinosaur models from Jurassic Park, namely the Jurassic Park 3 Velociraptor. Dinosaurs. In 1998, Bandai created a toy line called Dinosaurs that featured robots that can transform into dinosaurs. In 2000, the toy company would collaborate with animation production studio Sunrise to create and release a 26-episode TV series with the same name. An evil alien army of dinosaurs called the Dragosaurs wants to siphon Earth's life source and prepare for an invasion, but are interrupted when the Dino Knights, Earth's Saurian guardians, awaken from their hibernation and fight against the aliens. The Dino Knights are made up of a group of talking dinosaurs, including Tyrannosaurus rex, Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, Pteranodon, a mammoth, and a saber-toothed cat. While the human characters are the traditional 2D anime style, all of the prehistoric characters are CG animated. And I have to say that even though the 3D effects aren't the best, they blend in pretty well with the 2D effects. Valley of the Dinosaurs. We've covered a couple of Hanna-Barbera's dinosaur-related shows here on the Iceberg already, but one that I don't hear talked about nearly as often is Valley of the Dinosaurs. The show follows the Butler family, who were traveling down the Amazon River during an archaeological expedition before being sucked into a whirlpool. When they emerge from the water, they discover they're not in the Amazon anymore, but rather they've stumbled upon a prehistoric world. Here, they befriend a primitive family and learn to survive in this new world that's dominated by dinosaurs. Apparently, this show aired on September 7th, 1974, the same day as 1974's Land of the Lost, a show that we talked about earlier. But Valley of the Dinosaurs didn't last nearly as long. The show only had a single season with 16 episodes, with the final one airing in December of the same year. However, there was some kind of continuation in 1975 with an 11-issue comic series published by Charlton Comics that was based on the show. Aside from that, it doesn't seem like the show has left that much of an impact in pop culture. Kaiju Oji. Kaiju Oji, also known as The Monster Prince, is a dinosaur tokusatsu show created by the Japanese production studio P Productions. In the show, parents and their newborn twins are traveling by plane before an active volcano causes it to crash in the water. While they were able to save one of the babies, the other was accidentally left behind and presumably dies in the crash. However, years later, the boy is discovered living on an island inhabited by dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures, even befriending one of them, a sauropod named Nessie. Together, they survive against the elements, including some of the other hostile inhabitants on the island, as well as aliens that want to invade Earth. I'm noticing that a lot of Japanese shows really like to combine aliens and dinosaurs together, which is really cool because I've always loved that concept. The show used suitmation for most, if not all, of their island and alien monsters, which makes sense considering this was made in the 60s. At this point in time, the suitmation method was very popular amongst Japanese media especially. Marine Kong. Marine Kong is considered to be one of, if not the first kaiju-related TV show that's about a dinosaur-like kaiju that emerges from the ocean and sets out to destroy Japan. It's later revealed to be a robot that was created by a villainous organization that wanted to use it to take over Japan. It's clear that the show took some inspiration from the Godzilla franchise, as even though at this point in time it only had 2 movies, it still proved to be financially successful. This inspired the show's production studio, Nissan Productions, to serialize the same basic concept. So a total of 26 episodes of Marine Kong were created that span across 2 series, and it aired on Fuji TV on April of 1960. And apparently, the show's considered to be partially lost, at least according to the Lost Media Wiki, which states that only 3 episodes out of the 26 are fully available, that being episodes 1, 2, and 13, which were ripped from a VHS tape that was officially released in 1984, that only had a few episodes of the series on it. Aside from that, only a handful of clips, screenshots, and posters are all that's left of the show's existence. Mosh Chops. Mosh Chops is a cute and warm little stop-motion children's show from the UK. It's set during prehistoric times and features a group of dinosaur and prehistoric animal characters as they explore and learn new things about the world around them. These characters include Moss Chops, named after the genus of prehistoric reptile of the same name, Allie, the Allosaurus, Mr. Ichthyosaurus, also named after the prehistoric marine reptile of the same name, Grandpa Diplodocus, named after the sauropod genus of the same name, Uncle Rex, the Tyrannosaurus rex, Mrs. Carey, the Triceratops, and even Flower, the first and only flower in their prehistoric world that can sing and exhibit emotions through movement. The models of the characters were designed by Sue Mark and animated by Martin Polin. And as impressive as the stop motion is, the show wouldn't last very long. It only lasted for 13 episodes and ran from July 5th to September 26th of 1983. Gogs. Gogs is a Welsh stop-motion slapstick comedy show that's set during the Stone Age and is centered around a family of cavemen that consists of an angry mother, a lazy father, and their 3 kids that include their dim-witted oldest son, their intelligent and often misunderstood daughter, and their mischievous infant. And along with them, there's also the crazy grandfather. The show mainly follows their many antics that include surviving in their brutal, primitive world, but in a very comedic fashion. And while the show does primarily follow this caveman family, I included it because it does feature some dinosaurs in it, which are heavily stylized to fit the very goofy, cartoony theme the show is going for. The stop motion is actually really good, and one of the most praised aspects of the show. I know I have it low on the Iceberg, which is mainly because I personally didn't know this show existed until I found it while doing research for this video, but it was very much recognized in other regions, and it would even go on to win several awards for its animation. In fact, it would hold this title for the BAFTA Simru Award for 4 years in a row from 1995 to 1998. The show's craft would even capture the attention of film director Steven Spielberg, who approached the show's producers, Daniel Morris and Michael Mort, with the opportunity to work on animation projects in the States, possibly even a film adaptation of their caveman comedy show. Morris and Mort seemed interested, but ultimately nothing would ever happen with this project. Gogs lasted for 2 seasons with a total of 13 episodes, including an extended special called Gogwana in 1998, which also served as the show's finale. Super Dinosaur. This was another show that I've never heard of until making this Iceberg, but Super Dinosaur is an action kids show about an armored Tyrannosaurus rex and his human friend Derek, who work together to fight against their enemy, Max Maximus, and his army of mutated dinosaurs. The show is actually based on a 2011 comic of the same name that ran for 23 issues. One of the people who worked on the comic was Robert Kirkman, who's worked on very popular comic series like The Walking Dead, Invincible, and Marvel Zombies, just to name a few. Definitely a lot more intense in comparison to the kid-friendly Super Dinosaur comic that Kirkman would eventually make. Apparently, the idea for the comic came from a drawing that Kirkman's colleague, comic book artist Jason Howard, did for his son, which was a Tyrannosaurus Rex with a cape. The two would eventually flesh the idea out and make some changes, which would ultimately lead to the Super Dinosaur comic. The rights for a TV show adaptation would eventually be picked up and worked on by a few production studios, including Spin Master Entertainment, Atomic Cartoons, and Skybound Entertainment. It would make its debut on the Canada-based TV network Teletoons on September 8, 2018. It was given a single season with 26 episodes, and aside from a mobile game that was released shortly after the show's original air date, not much else has come from the IP. Donnie Deinonychus. For our final entry, we have a very short-lived educational TV program aimed at kids titled Donnie Deinonychus. The show is about the titular dinosaur character, Donnie, who was created in a lab in a freak accident. Donnie was originally a parrot that was playing in Professor Stevens' lab before being struck by a bolt of electricity from some of the equipment that causes him to transform into a Deinonychus. Along with his new transformation, Donnie also inherits all of the memories of prehistoric life, giving him the ability to inform viewers facts about dinosaurs. There's not a whole lot on the internet about this show, but a small promotional article does appear in Starline Magazine's Dinosaur Delirium special from 1993. In it, it explains that the show was created by film director, producer, and writer Jose Escamilla, and was produced by Ultimate Dinosaur Productions, of which he also created. The show is centered around Donnie teaching kids certain values and lessons that you normally see in kids shows, while also giving them facts and information about dinosaurs. As far as to what came of the show, it's hard to tell given how obscure it is. According to the article, the show was designed as a multimedia package that was to include a bunch of supplementary materials like storybooks, cassette tapes, and videotapes. I'm not sure if any of this was ever made. However, the program was uploaded to Escamilla's personal YouTube channel that has a little bit more information about it in its description. In 1993, before UFO showed up in 1994, I was doing a series of cartoon episodes with stars such as Ruth Buzzy, Kathy Ireland, Richard Mole, Nell Carter, Carlos Palomino, Ed Begley Jr., Brenda Vaccaro, Dr. Joyce Brothers, Tom Bosley, Susie Kurtz, and I almost had Vincent Price do the Halloween special show, but he was too ill. Either way, I made these shows that aired on Radio Oz, and we had kids that were fans of the shows who are now probably adults. This is the first video of the proposed series. This is the cutest dinosaur that taught morals to kids. I had the list of kids that joined the fan club back then. I wonder where they are now. Also, in case you're curious about that UFO bit in the beginning there, apparently Escamilla was involved in a lot of UFO-related films as well. Anyways, this show is very interesting to me. I think the idea of transforming a modern bird into a dinosaur is a clever idea, and one that was ahead of the game. At least as far as fictional dinosaur media went, considering the only other example this early on that did something similar with bird-like dinosaurs that I can think of is Carnosaur, which is a stark contrast to Donnie Deinonychus. In any case, it's a very strange and obscure piece of paleomedia, and one that I'd like to learn more about. If anyone has any more information on it, let me know in the comments down below. And there you have it, the dinosaur TV show Iceberg. Listen, I'll be the first to tell you, this iceberg is not complete, as I ran into other dinosaur shows while recording for this video, so I know that there's a ton of dinosaur shows out there that I probably didn't include, and that's not even counting the tons of other dinosaur shows I probably don't even know exist, or just completely forgot about. So if there's anything that you saw missing from the iceberg, let me know in the comments down below. If I can gather enough entries, I may follow it up with a second dinosaur TV show Iceberg like I did with the dinosaur movie Icebergs. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for your patience as always. That's all I have to say for now, so please, have a nice day.